Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Live Ultralight Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Josh Perry, on, who is a multi-trail FKT runner. But not only that, he's a self-supported, not a outside supported FKT runner, which is also really is a totally different animal, in my opinion, which I really am excited to dive into today. You currently, or at least that's the information I have here, is that you currently have both the PCT self-supported FKT. So FKT is fastest known time, as well as the Arizona Trail, which is an 800-mile trail through Arizona. Both of these trails you did in phenomenal times, crazy times, which I want to dive into. But very, very excited to have you on the podcast here, Josh. So how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
It sounds like the last trail that you just did was the PCT. Is that correct? That's your most recent FKT?
Yeah. I finished the PCT August 7th, I think.
Okay.
I had a very short-lived attempt on the Colorado Trail as well, a few weeks after that, but I was not recovered in any way, shape, or form.
I can't imagine how you would have been.
No,
right?
But the hubris of youth.
How many FKTs have you attempted?
So I've held 3, so the 2 you mentioned, and the long trail in Vermont.
Okay.
I tried the PCT in 2019 as well. I tried the John Muir Trail in 2019, and I tried the Cape Wrath Trail in the UK last year as well. Yeah.
So you've got a few attempts here as well. I'm just curious, what happens on the attempts that, like, you've obviously have the ability to execute on some of these other trails. So what's happened on some of these ones that you weren't able to execute on?
So I quit the PCT last time because I found out I was allergic to wasps, and I went into anaphylaxis on day 1,000 miles into the trail. And turns out when you go into anaphylaxis for the first time, and you've also just run 1,000 miles, your body's not really capable of recovering properly.
Wow.
So I was like actively just collapsing on the trail for about 3 days.
Oh, wow. You continued for 3 days. So you didn't just go straight to a hospital or something. Wow.
No, I got to town. I got to this lodge on the Oregon border, spent a few hours there, decided to continue, took a day off after that, did 55 miles the next day whilst collapsing twice, and then quit the next day.
Just a mere 55 miles, huh?
Just a meager day. I only collapsed incredible. Twice on that day.
Yeah. So it obviously takes you a lot to get off trail. What about some of these other scenarios? I mean, have they even been like just a fueling or anything like that? Or is it typically something much bigger that can slow you down?
It's usually something. So the John Muir Trail was a windstorm hit, and I got altitude sickness early on, like before I'd summited Whitney. It's like 3 hours in, I was puking. So I was like, I went on for 27 hours, I think. But
yeah, you get it that quick.
It wasn't going to happen. The Cape Wrath Trail was a panic attack, and the CT, the Colorado Trail, was just like chronic fatigue still.
I can't imagine that you would recover. Like you say, I mean, that's just, it can take, for runners, right? I mean, sometimes it can take months and months between races to fully recover and get back going again. So to attempt that trail that quick is absolutely wild.
Foolish.
But what if it had happened, right? So you can't fault you for considering it, right? So I want to dive into just some of these trails, because I think what makes it the most fascinating to me is the amount of miles per day and just the elevation, right? So if you're looking at the PCT, you're averaging 46 to 47 miles a day by my calculations. And then I had some mixed numbers on like the total elevation gain on that trail, but somewhere between 3,500, 350,000 miles, or feet of elevation climb versus 420,000 feet of elevation climb. I'm not sure which one of those it is, but in that range, just tons and tons of elevation either way. But just considering that, right, 46 to 47 miles a day, how did you get there? What's the story behind you being able to go from an average person hiking 10 miles a day when they're backpacking to a more performance focused person who probably does a little bit of training doing 20 miles a day or maybe up to 30 on their biggest pushes, but you hardly ever hear of someone going farther than that, right? So just talk me through like that progression for you. How did you get to the point where you're not only doing 46 miles a day, but back to back to back and self-supporting, right? So for a little bit of context, I started trail running a little over a year ago. And this year I decided to enter my first ultra marathon. I'm a bigger guy. I'm not built for running, but for some reason I enjoy it, right? I'm sitting at like 200 pounds at 6'2", right? So, but I ran this race. It was a 70K. It ended up being about 45 miles and tons of elevation. It was like 12,000 feet of elevation in the 45 miles, but it beat the crap out of me, like severely beat the crap out of me. And so my thought is, this guy is doing it. Josh here, you're doing it day after day after day. So how in the world did you work yourself up to that position?
So you're not that much bigger than me then.
That's good. That's good enough. So there's hope for me, you're saying?
Yeah. I'm 6 foot and usually between 175 and 180 pounds.
Okay.
I think I averaged 49 miles a day on the PCT.
Wow.
I think that's how it worked out.
There's always an under track, like when you're mapping it versus on the hoof, you know what I mean? It's always farther.
Yeah. Well, but so I started hiking ancient pilgrimages, like the El Camino de Santiago and the 88 Temples walk in Japan. And they were flat, like road, like farm road, dirt road, a bit of like trail stuff. And on that Japan walk, there wasn't a lot of people out there. I think like 12 people did it that year on foot. So I just kind of, because you have all day to walk, I just walked all day. And then the following year I did the Appalachian Trail, and my time frame was about 3 months. But the actual mileage I was doing a day because I'd been used to walking 30 miles a day on roads. I walked basically my first 2,000 miles on the road, and it kind of got you into it. It was a very gentle way of getting into it. So then when I went on the AT, doing 50% or a third less mileage, but with the elevation, didn't seem as striking of a task, or as daunting of a task. So I hiked the AT in 3 months exactly in 2016. And then the following year on the CDT, I was dumb and clueless and started southbound at the start of June in a big snow year.
Oh, wow.
So I don't think there was another hiker to start after me for like 2 weeks. So I was just on my own out there. Like I hiked with someone for the first 5 days through Glacier, and then again in Colorado. That was like 2 and a bit thousand miles of being on my own.
Wow.
So I just, again, because I just like to walk, like the walking is the fun part for me. So I just built up to walking all day. And then after that,
So you started walking, what? So maybe 2015, and you just basically
14.
Never stopped? 2014?
Yeah. I started when I was 18. And
so you aren't one of these guys that, do you have like a massive training regime behind that, like your work? Like, do you, you have to be running some of these miles, right? At this point, at least.
I did on the PCT, but I maintain it is pointless. So as far as I'm aware, I'm the only person to have done a 400-mile self-supported week on a long trail, which is 57.3 miles a day or something. And I didn't run a step of that.
Really? So you're saying that like on the PCT, you're walking the PCT that fast?
For the most part. On the PCT, I ran a bit more. The 400-mile week was on the Arizona Trail, but like I've only recently started like jogging or shuffling on the trails a bit more, and still it's not much. Like,
are you like perfecting like a power walk? Are you like creating this new stride?
It's just like, how little can I lift my feet up and not just kick everything and trip over all the time?
Right.
You know, wears out your shoes super quickly.
Right. I can only imagine. So you're for the most part walking, maybe slightly, running a lot of these.
Yeah.
So to me, that means that one, you've got to be a very fast hiker, but two, like extremely streamlined, like almost no breaks or very little stoppage. Yeah. And then also like your day, you've got to be starting really early and hiking into the night. What's your typical day look like on trail?
So I did 42 miles into Snoqualmie Pass with 8 minutes worth of breaks. And that included a poo break. I was just like hyper efficient when I have to be. Because I kind of came into big miles from a hiking perspective and only started running. Like the PCT was the first time I started like running on trail. So I came in with like a very good background in like hyper efficiency, just from years of thru hiking. And then I started running around the same time as the CDT and have finally started like, building that into this stuff. But a typical day, I try and get 6 hours sleep a night. I think there were. And
is that like 6 hours of stoppage time, or is that like 6 hours getting in the tent, 6 hours, and then you're exiting? You know what I'm saying? Like, because some people if you got 6 hours, you've got like
6.5 hours stoppage.
Okay, so you've got 15 minutes on either side to get your camp set up.
I try and do 20 minutes in the evening and be moving in less than 10 minutes in the morning.
Wow. Okay. And so what time are you waking up?
It depends. With self-supported, because your days are constrained by your resupply schedule. If that business shuts at 6 p.m., you have to get those miles in by 6. So whilst I try to get 6 hours a night, I think I averaged 4.5 hours a night over the entire trail because of how many like 3 hour. Well, I think I did 8 or 9 3-hour nights because I had to make a resupply. Because I had to make 40 miles by 3 p.m. or 50 miles by 6 p.m., 7 p.m.
There's so many fascinating areas I want to take this. You're just this treasure trove of ways we could take this. Anyways, before I get into some of these nuances of just what you probably were experiencing, what made you start to want to do FKTs? What's your why? Pushing yourself that hard, sleeping 3 hours a night for 55 days, right? You've got to have a reason behind that's helping to fuel you, right? So, what is it for you that's like, this is what I get out of it.
It's a lot of fun. But it was also how I was introduced to the sport, the kind of hiking. I first heard about I wasn't a runner or an outdoors kid. Like, I was active, but I wasn't like through martial arts and skateboarding, not through running or anything as a child. So I never heard of thru hiking. And then I remember reading an article about Heather Anderson's hike in 2013. And so the PCT record was the first time I heard about thru hiking. So I didn't know it was a thing people did for fun. I just knew it was a thing this one person did really fast. Like, right. It kind of like, I thought it was like, how transcon runners, like, it's not a thing people do, but occasionally someone does it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was such a community community existed around it. And then the next 2 hikers I heard about were Andrew Skirka and John Zahorian, who both also hiked 40-mile days. So my introduction to this was like, you just hike 40-mile days.
That's just what you do.
So like, that was like, as soon as I started, when I was walking around Japan, I was like, oh, cool, I did a 40-mile day. I'm a hiker now.
Right. I'm finally a hiker after a 40-mile day.
Yeah. I had no context around how far things were.
Right.
That was my introduction. I was kind of always funneled in towards that kind of stuff. And when I finally started meeting other hikers on the Appalachian Trail, because I'd already hiked a few thousand miles, I had a good base, and like I was fit enough to do that, and I enjoyed doing that. So I just did my own thing, and hiked with the hikers who were going at my pace rather than slowing down to match everyone else's.
Yeah, that's so interesting, right? I feel like because you get this public eye on some of these FKTs and attempts like that, right? That's just so interesting that became your perspective of it, right? Yeah. That's really fascinating. So when you go and complete these now, like okay, now you've got a better perspective, right? You're passing people all day long on these trails. You're passing them while they sleep. You're passing them while they take a break, and you're passing them while they're going up a hill. Like, is it just become ingrained in you? Like, you're just like, this is just what I do. Like, you don't even think about like hiking slower or like, are you someone who's just super goal oriented? And so that's where like so much of that drive comes in to continue to do these.
So I've hiked about 20,000 miles now, and like in terms of long distance trips, and I've hiked enough on trails at kind of a more casual pace that I just don't get as much out of it as I used to. Like, it's nice to do for like a weekend, but I have no desire to go and do a 6-month through hike, because it just seems it seems draining. For me, like a nice 3 months is a nice through hike length, but like spending 6 months out there sounds exhausting.
When we were doing some hiking on the AT this summer, and all these guys are on like a 5-month, 6-month like pace. It is pretty wild for me to consider, because I guess the way my mind works is I'm just like, what if you guys increased your mileage a little bit every day? You didn't stop to set up camp at 3 p.m., and like you could finish this much faster. And I think for me that like you inherently make sense. I don't know that it would make sense for other people that like the drive you have to push like that, but I feel like I can understand that. But it's really interesting. I think you're very unique in that sense that you're just willing to do this. And I still, my mind just keeps coming back to the fact that you don't really run a lot of these, right? Because coming into starting to follow a lot of the running world in the last year and a half, and looking at some of these FKTs, and there's someone out on the Arizona Trail, I think 2 guys right now out on the Arizona Trail right now attempting. Oh, really?
I'm smack talking 2 of them. One of them's going after my record, so I'm like trying.
Really? So he's doing self-supported. Okay.
So I'm trying to like poke him along and get him to speed up a bit.
Wait, you want him to beat your record?
Oh yeah.
So see, that's a fascinating thing too. Is it seems like a lot in the FKT world, people want people to beat their record instead of be like, no, I want to hold the record as long as possible. I think that's really interesting too.
I've had it 3 years. That's long enough.
3 years. Wow, that's a pretty long-standing record in this day and age.
Yeah. It's held some. Well, I mean, COVID happened as well, so that kind of limited people's attempts for a while. But there's been a few attempts on it. Yeah.
That's so cool. But like you look at some of these, or like Timothy Olson, right? He holds the supported FKT for the PCT trail, right? And he beat your time by 3 days. Like you were only 3 days behind him. He ran it 4 days. So he ran it in like 51, 52 days. You ran it in 55. To me, that's absolutely incredible, because these guys are runners. Like these guys are ultra runners. They compete in ultra running. And then you come in and you're just power hiking and barely coming in behind him.
Well, so I was ahead of Tim for 6 weeks. I was trying to break Tim's record.
How does this make sense? Make sense for us. Because I'm sure he's running. Like the footage I see is him running down the trail, right?
The only reason I didn't, so some hubris there, but the only reason I didn't was because I had to bushwhack around a fire closure that he was allowed to drive around.
You drive around?
Yeah. So his record doesn't have continuous footsteps.
Oh, what?
Whereas I had to bushwhack around this fire closure, which added about 30 hours. And then because I did a 30-mile dry stretch without water, I got sick on it as well. But those guys, I guess why Joe Stringbane did it on the Appalachian Trail as well. Most of these elite runners don't really do their due diligence in like learning the style. They just rock up, assume they're fit enough, they're fitter than all of us, and just go and run. And they kind of are. They are fit enough to just go and do that. But it means, when there's people like me or like Joe who have the background to do the same mileage, but have like the hyper efficiency of the thru-hiker down, we can keep up with them. Because those guys take really long breaks, and the more you run, the more breaks you need to take.
Right.
So my whole approach
you can't make up for time. Like stopped time costs so much, right? Like that's definitely something I've learned too, just doing 30-mile days and stuff on trail, is like 5-10 minutes, man, that really adds up. And you think about it, like if you were to do, let's say you were running 5 miles an hour for 5 miles, but then you take a 5-minute break, you know what I mean? Like that drops you down significantly. Your pace per mile just starts eroding so fast, right?
Yeah. Well, so on the Arizona Trail, I averaged about 4 hours of sleep a night, but I only did 3 60-mile days. So
only
like 3 miles an hour my pace is 3 miles an hour or more at all times, like my actual moving pace.
Yeah.
But if I'm putting in these 20-hour days and I'm not hitting 60 because of breaks. So
that's what I was just going to say, is that's 20-hour day at 3 miles an hour to hit 60 miles.
Yeah. With
zero stopping, if you're keeping that 3 miles an hour.
Yeah. And because there is just essential stopping, like it's the amount of the more you run, the more essential stops you have. And if you have a support team, then you're more likely to spend time, because you've got the option to spend time with them.
Right.
Like you can get food, you can get taken care of. Like taking care of yourself is important, but not as important as these runners.
That's such an interesting argument, because so like I say, I've ran one ultra, right? And I didn't even run it that well. But like you get to the stops, right? And it's like, what do? You start planning your day stop to stop. And so you carry the water that you need to get to this stop, and the fueling, but you're like, kind of like, you become a little bit reliant on when I get there, then I'll have it, instead of, no, my body needs it right now and it's with me. Right. And so there was definitely times, for instance, where I sweat a lot. I'm a massive sweater. And so hydration is incredibly difficult for me. Right. I can lose, I lose 2 liters of water an hour when I'm running. A lot of times, like I've done some testing and tracking, and it's stupid. Right. But, so I messed up my hydration, but I didn't have the things with me to fix it on trail. So now I've got to go 6 more miles feeling like this to get to the next spot. And now you've just dug this massive hole, and you're trying to dig your way out of it. And it becomes this. And so I found that to be true for sure, where when you become reliant on the support you have, you behave differently. You don't keep as many things with you, right? It's like, okay, well, now I don't need to carry anything on me, so because any weight is going to slow me down, and so on and so forth. But the reality is, now I don't have the stuff I might need in a specific moment, right? So that's a really interesting point you're making. Go ahead.
I think it also just comes down to, I think the self-supported records are current, on the long trails at least, are currently more competitive than the supported ones.
Like more people are doing the unsupported trails, like attempts?
No, more people are doing them supported. They're just not trying hard enough. like Stringbean and Carl Sabe are the 2 examples who are like people who are trying to push the boundaries. And I think a lot of the elite runners who come into it are trying to do as little as they can to break the record. And I understand why, because if you're an elite runner, you have a paycheck. Like, I know, like, most of these guys are getting about 30 grand for the long trails. So why would you risk going out faster and blowing up and put your paycheck on the line when you can kind of take it a bit easier and still struggle, but not as much as you potentially could do? Yeah. And they play it safer so the records haven't been pushed as far as
So you expect them to continue to fall in the supported category?
Yeah. I think you will start seeing averages of 60 plus miles a day in the supported category quite soon. Mm-hmm. With people like, Carl Sabe and Joe McConaughey really pushing it. But I don't know how much further self-supported people can go.
Yeah. So I've got to ask, let's dive into some of the hydration and fueling, right? So you don't have much time to stop. It's not like you're sitting down and having lunch. It's not like you're spending time doing any of these things. So what does that look like? What, like on trail, let's say it's food. Let's start with food. How are you fueling yourself in a day?
So I have a bottom pocket on my backpack, and that will carry. So I put all my food in there, so I can just snack as I go.
Yeah.
After a few weeks on trail at 50 mile a day pace, I'm eating 10 to 12,000 calories a day, and that's made up of about 3,000 calories of M&Ms, 3,000 calories of.
Sorry. Now you really are starting to sound like a thru-hiker here.
So the fun part with that is
calories of M&Ms.
I was hanging out in Southern California for all of May, and whilst I was making my boxes up, I did an experiment. So I went to, I think it was just a Walmart, and bought all of the types of M&Ms they had, a 10-ounce bag of like 12 different types of M&Ms. And then I went camping the next day, and I went to see which ones melted in the heat. And I ate all 12 bags in an overnight, but it was like an actual experiment to find out what melted in the sun and what didn't.
Yeah.
So like to know which ones to pack for the PCT.
Okay. Well, what's the answer?
Basically anyone with something solid inside of it. So
like a peanut M&M or something.
Yeah, but the peanut butter ones melt, like the chocolate ones melt. The fudge brownie ones melt, but in a really good way.
In a really good way.
So I did a lot of like peanut, English toffee.
Dark so 3,000 calories of M&Ms.
Yeah.
What else? What else do you have?
3,000 calories of nuts, like cashews and almonds. 3,000 calories of candy, like gummy candy, Haribo, Sour Patch Kids, that kind of stuff. And then 3,000 calories of just snack bars, like cereal bars and granola bars and Nature Valley bars. Or if I'm feeling fancy, like Bobos and Cliff Bars and all that stuff. But generally can't afford it.
So your only protein really is coming from nuts?
Yeah,
because
I try and avoid protein. Yeah.
You try to avoid protein. How is your body not just like imploding and eating its own muscles up? And
because I'm still getting 12,000 calories a day.
Yeah, but muscles need protein, right? I mean, isn't that the thing?
Not like it. What we're doing isn't that. It's not like weightlifting where you're completely tearing your muscles down. It's a very slow, slow damage to your muscles, and protein satiates you. So if you're on a high protein diet, then you're feeling full on less calories.
Okay.
And because I'm trying to get in so many calories a day,
it actually works against you, huh?
Yeah. If I have more protein, then eating becomes a chore. Like I'm having to force myself to eat, and if I'm having to force myself to eat, then I'm not getting. You naturally don't get as many calories in.
Yeah.
So
you're like the only person I know of that eats 12,000 calories a day. You and Michael Phelps. You know who Michael Phelps is?
Yeah.
So but yeah, I mean, going back to it, M&Ms you eat as you go, nuts you eat as you go, gummies you eat as you go, and bars you eat as you go.
Yeah.
No need to stop. No need to cook. One less thing you're not taking.
Yeah.
Does that satisfy you? Like, do you feel like do you crave food? Do you like when you go through town, or you're like, man, I wish that McDonald's was open at 12 p.m. when I get here because I'm hiking all night?
So I had a hot meal in town. Well, most of the towns. So I think I had 17 or 18 meals on trail. I had them at most of my resupplies. In the desert, I did ramen just for the salt because it was so hot.
Yeah.
But it's just cold soaked ramen. I just didn't carry a stove. I just poured water on it and had it crunchy.
Yeah. So how much time and effort do you put into nutrition? Like when you look at ultra elite runners, right? Like they're crazy about nutrition, right? Like they know everything. It feels like they know everything from like, I need this many electrolytes exactly, and this and this. I mean, and like for me, like I took an electrolyte sweat loss test to see how much sweat or salt and all that kind of stuff. I mean, or is yours, like for you, is it just all based on field experience, what works, what doesn't in the field?
Yeah.
Not so much like test runs of this food and like looking at the molecular level of this versus this.
No, so it's all about caloric density for me. So calories per ounce. And then when I'm carrying 5 days worth of food through the Sierra, my food is denser. So it's got more calories per ounce to keep my pack weight lighter. But when I'm only carrying 2 days, I try and like add in some raisins or some prunes or something to get some, or like dehydrated fruit on the shorter carries to get a bit more nutrients. But I think that approach is kind of, it's come from my thru hiking background of having to resupply in these tiny little gas stations in the middle of nowhere, Idaho. And I've just learned what works for me. But then you also have like ultra runners like, Courtney DeWalter and Camille Herron, who frequently like chug a beer and have pizzas and hamburgers on trail, on races.
Courtney is in a class of her own though, right? I mean, she's not human, I don't think, but.
So I'm like, that's my school of thought. It's just like, whatever you want to eat, like, I don't go out.
One of the things they say to do is go on a long run and then walk into a gas station or a grocery store and just see what jumps off the shelf at you, right? Like that's your body telling you what it might need. So super, super fascinating. While you were saying that though, you're hiking a lot at night. So you've got to be using headlamps a lot. I guess you could be using battery-based headlamps instead of recharging, but like you've got to have things you got to recharge, right? Because you got to recharge a watch, I'd imagine, for tracking, or a phone for tracking the FKTs. So how do you charge stuff while you're constantly moving?
So I had my phone and my head torch and my InReach for tracking. I use a very low power method of tracking from InReach. So I don't have it on tracking mode. I send out pings every hour to 2 hours. So you send out a preset message and turn it off. So I could typically get 10 to 12 days.
Oh, so you're not leaving your InReach on. You turn it on, ping, turn it off.
Yeah.
Turn it on, ping, turn it off. Okay.
My phone, I listen to music and use it for maps and photos and everything. So that needs charging, and my head torch is USB rechargeable as well. But I carried a 20,000 milliamp hour battery pack. 12 and a half ounces or something, but it fully charges in 4 hours, and it gets 80% of its charge in 2 hours or something. So I can get if I take a 90-minute town stop, then I can get over 10,000 milliamps of battery, which will last me. And so I just plug it in every time I get to town, and it charges however much it charges, and then it worked out.
Have you ever
it only ran out of power once. Yeah. That's quite me fast. No. Everything was fully charged. So when I'm walking into town, I make sure on that day into town, I make sure I'm charging everything. So nothing else needs charging except the battery, so I can just plug that in and leave it.
Right.
And because it charges quick enough that it just never really runs out.
Yeah.
But there are FKTers who put a fresh battery pack in every single resupply box. They fully charge them all.
How often are you getting resupplies though?
I got 18 boxes on the PCT. Yeah. So I sent out 18 in advance. Yeah. So every resupply for the trail was done in advance for me.
Oh, so you're not walking into many stores to buy M&Ms off the shelf. They're waiting in a box.
It's all pre-packaged. Yeah, so I went to a grocery outlet and bought 600,000 calories worth of food, which is like 6 trolleys worth.
Yeah, Costco's like, you're my favorite customer. Huh? You're buying crates of M&Ms and
yeah, like literally going to the end of an aisle and just wiping everything off it into a trolley. It's like, I need 54 bags of M&Ms.
Wow. That's pretty wild though, to think that you could get by just using a battery bank, not having to swap it out, not having to do any of that. I mean, that's probably the single biggest thing that could make you take a break on trail though, would be like giving your battery bank just a little bit more time to charge, right?
Yeah. So. I think most of them now charge so quickly that you can. There's ones that charge like 12,000 milliamp hour ones that charge in an hour or an hour and a half. It's like if you're kind of, when you go to resupply, it takes a minute because you're going to get a hot meal anyway. So I tried to keep my resupplies down to 90 minutes, which was just enough time to charge to get me like a decent amount of juice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are you relying on like apps like Far Out or something like that to really help you along the way as well?
Yes and no. In the desert, I made a list of every water source that was deemed reliable the day I started. Well, the day before I started, I went through all 700 miles of the desert and just made a list of like the mile that the good water was at, and then which ones were water caches or plumbed sources, so I could really trust them. But I didn't have paper maps or anything else. I just had mapping on my phone. But the PCT is so well marked, you're very rarely reliant on an app for navigation purposes.
But I mean, part of the Far Out app too is that it shows you water, along the way, things like that too, right?
Yeah. So I prepared the entire desert in advance with Far Out, so I didn't have to look at the map to figure out how far it was. I could just see a list of numbers and be like, well, it's that one there. Then in the Sierra, I didn't carry a drop of water for about 300 miles because it's just water's everywhere.
What are you using to filter water? Are you using flasks with filters or what? You just drink it?
Nothing. I just drink it.
No.
Yeah, I haven't filtered water since 2016.
You just got Giardia once and you're like, I'm good.
I got crypto on the AT whilst filtering.
Huh.
I don't know what happened. I was using a Sawyer Mini. It's really slow. It was 2,000 miles old at that point. Those things slow down.
So you don't have water filter companies signing up to sponsor you yet, sounds like, but
I mean, if whoever produces bleach wants to sponsor me,
you just put bleach in it?
If I feel like I carry like a 5 ml drop a bottle of bleach for emergency use.
So even going across the desert, because some of those water sources are bad, right? Like they're bad.
They're not. Like PCT water sources are good.
Okay.
Like New Mexico and Arizona Trail, they've got bad water.
Yeah, a lot of livestock water, right?
Yeah. On the divide, I had to fill up from a cow trough that I was watching a cow actively poop into on the other side.
And you're not filtering.
I couldn't find my bleach.
And you drank it. And
I carried 4 liters of it, but I think I drank half a liter and I just like got really dehydrated over the next 20 miles to the next water source.
Oh my goodness. I
didn't get sick.
I don't know how. I'm sure we've all got like an over phobia of drinking water, right? Like going back to that ultra run I was walking past creeks and stuff that I'm like 99.9% chance I'd be just fine drinking that water. But like in my head, I'm like, but I don't have a water filter with me. And so I won't do it. And it's dumb. Like, especially even like right now sitting here, because I also knew that like after that, like I had a trip like the next week. I'm like, if I got Giardia, I'd have to cancel this massive trip that's also already planned. And so I'm like, no, I won't do it. But it's probably just a ridiculous phobia for a lot of it.
It's hard to say. There is no way to guess if a water source is good or bad. I think to some extent you can build up some gut resistance to it, but you can't build up any resistance to like Giardia. And I'd never recommend anyone else not to filter. Like, it's a personal decision I've made.
That's a huge advantage you have. I mean, if I was doing an FKT, I would be filtering. So you've cut off a good chunk of time. Yeah,
I look at String Bean with his 2 little, filters on his bottles, and I'm like, no one got time for that. No one got
it. So sleeping 3 hours a night. Let's go back to that.
That's like my low.
Yeah. Any cases of hallucinations, or like extreme cases of just getting out of it in your own head?
There was never too many. Like, I'm not someone who hallucinates really badly. I have like visual glitches where like you just see blocks and stuff that aren't there, and your reactions get really dulled. I don't really remember any hallucinations on the PCT. On the Arizona Trail, I saw a demonic cow with like red eyes and Satan horns on my last night, and it was following me. And I think there was probably a cow there, and I was adding the horns and the eyes. But I don't know. Like, I was so out of it.
Was that in the middle of the night?
Yeah. Yeah, it was 1 a.m.
Yeah, so I've heard that, and I don't remember the exact time, but it's like from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. They call it the witching hour or something like that. They say that like 90% of all hallucinations happen like in that specific span. Even if you've been like even more severely sleep deprived and so on and so forth, like that's almost always when those hallucinations happen. So that's kind of interesting, but also terrifying. Like, right? Like, were you terrified of this cow? Or
I was so scared of it. Yeah. Like, I was legitimately terrified. Running.
So do you go to bed? You just go to bed, or?
No, I'm moving. I'm getting away from that thing. So, I was trying to be rational and figure out if it was real, but you're so out of it at that point you can't. So my response was, get that thing away from me.
So you just keep hiking all night.
Yeah, I hiked for like an hour and a half more,
and it didn't follow you past there.
At some point, it left me alone, and I'd forgotten about it enough to sleep.
That's terrifying.
That's
especially, just being alone in the middle of the woods at night. For some people, they're so scared of that they'd never even consider it. And you're setting an FKT. It's not like you're carrying, any protection or anything like that. That helps satiate people from feeling nervous or scared at night. Like, you just become one with the woods, and you just have to feel totally comfortable there, right?
Yeah. What I found really interesting about doing all the night hiking is how, and this isn't what those people want to hear, but how interested those animals are in your tent.
You always walk up and they're right around the tent.
Like, the amount of skunks I saw on the Arizona Trail on trail next to a hiker. And then there were over 6 occasions on the PCT when I saw a bear within 5 foot of someone's tent in the dark.
No.
It was like, there were no bear attacks on the PCT this year.
So 5 bears, like you said, right next to people's tents?
Oh, no, it happened over 6. I stopped counting after the 6th time. But like, the bear was within 5 foot of someone's tent.
Are these just, like popular areas to camp? They're just trying to sniff out food?
They're not established campsites. Like, they're gut hook campsites. Like,
really?
So it's not like they're national park campsites or somewhere on the JM. None of them were on the JMT. It was all Northern California and Oregon. But they were just curious in the tent, and then no more. I would have heard if there was a bear attack on trail,
right,
and there weren't any. So it was just these bears being curious in people's tents. But
yeah, they're probably trying to just put their paw under the vestibule, sneak out a load of candy,
Like, it's something unless you're doing a lot of night hiking, You never
don't
see
see it.
you see the woods of the trail in a totally different light.
So, I mean, were you seeing we're seeing bears all along the route, like mainly at night? Or is it mainly just at campsites?
I saw most of my wildlife at night. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I saw a few mountain lions at night.
Mountain lions?
Yeah.
I don't like mountain lions probably as much as I like bears even. I feel like they're just so much more sneaky, man.
Oh, bears aren't scary. Mountain lions are scary. They still
they just look scarier too. I'm sure seeing them at night and their faces, like they have a more scary look.
Well, you see their eyes. Their eyes glow red.
Right.
They're like cows' eyes. If you shine a head torch on them, they don't glow red, which I learned afterwards. But if you put a head torch on a mountain lion's eyes, they actually glow red in the dark. So they look even scarier with like demonic eyes.
So, are you carrying a big headlamp, like a very high lumen headlamp, or what are you carrying?
Nightcore, NU20, NU25, like standard thru-hiker.
Yeah,
I just carry two of the bodies with one
strap,
like one strap and one basket, and then you can just pop it out and put a new one back in.
Okay, yeah, that would be really light. They're just little tiny squares, real easy. Yeah,
350 lumens or something.
Yeah, we had a scenario where there's some wildlife that was just outside our camp, and we are trying to figure out what the heck it was. And I'm the kind of guy who always had like the most minimal headlamps, right? Just like the tiniest headlamp, and because I'm like, I'm not scared out here. I don't feel that scared.
Yeah.
But in this scenario, I was trying to shine my light on something that was, about 50 yards out of a camp, and it just wasn't moving. And we threw like a rock at it or a big log at it. Hit right next to it, didn't even blink, and I'm like, gosh dang, this tiny headlamp, I can't see what this is, I got so mad about it. But it's like, but I don't feel like going to investigate, to get right in on top of it to see what the heck this thing is. But yeah, it's definitely like, a trade-off, I guess. The NU25 though has been a very solid performer for us, and it has a very bright setting when you need it, especially for its size. It's really impressive, but night hiking would be pretty interesting. I'm sure like in a lot of ways though, getting that night hiking in is just so important because it's less hot, less like exposure at times, right? So it's probably in some ways easier miles on your body, right?
Yeah, it's a bit slower. Night hiking is inherently a bit slower, but I actually really enjoy it. So like it's not like it's a chore for me. Like especially in like the Sierra, being up those passes with like a backdrop silhouette of jagged mountains with a full moon behind them. It was an incredible time. Like I love night hiking. But yeah, I don't think I could do. You can't put in long enough days without doing it either. It is essential.
Right. So talking about gear here for a second, is there any pieces of gear that just stood out to you that you feel like are critical? Like what type of a backpack are you typically using? Are you using a frame? Are you using frameless? Are you using like a fast packing pack?
So I've worked with a company called Nashville Pack Company. So it's a frame. Their pack is the Cutaway is a frameless pack with like vest style straps for a regular pack style body. So it's somewhere between like a fast pack and a hiking bag. It has a lot of pockets on it. Like it has 6 pockets on the straps, plus the bottom pocket, plus the reach around pocket. So there's that Japanese concept of everything having its place. And I joke with them a bit about their backpack being that. I think it's Seimon or something. Because there's so many pockets, I can keep everything so organized. But it's still just like a 14-ounce frameless backpack for the most part.
We've got a fast pack under development and I'm probably not supposed to say this, but it's got that underneath pocket that you're talking about, like a stretch underneath pocket. Yeah, that thing is so beneficial. Like it's so nice.
Yeah, I've stopped using packs in like my day-to-day life, like work bags that don't have a bottom pocket. It's become so crucial for me for everything. I'm just a snob.
Wait, did you say work life? Do you work?
I have a job sometimes.
Sometimes.
Like 6 months of the year. Currently looking for one if anyone in the UK wants to give me one.
Just move to Utah. We'll seasonally employ you.
Please do.
Yeah, that's interesting. Any other pieces of gear? I know like you're using the lightest weight stuff you can get. So I imagine you're using quilt. You're probably using like an Ultralight pad or something like that. Right? Or is that kind of like your mantra of picking gear?
I am less weight focused than I used to be. I hiked the CDT with a 4.5 pound base weight and was like, cool, I've done the super ultralight thing. I don't care anymore. So I still only have like a 6.5
pound base weight.
Yeah. So I had a 6.5 pound base weight this year. Because I think I don't think a pound of weight is going to slow me down, but it makes things more efficient. Right. So I pick things based on efficiency rather than weight.
6.5 pounds though is still ridiculous, right? So are you taking a tent? Are you taking a bivvy?
So I have a tarp. I have like this like 4.5 ounce Cuban or DCF tarp that I made that was like laughably small, and I never pitched it because it just didn't rain. It only rained on me at night twice, and I got lucky with where I was, so I didn't have to pitch my tarp. I don't have a bivvy. I had a poncho quilt, which was really useful in the mornings because I could like wear it until the last minute instead of having to put my quilt in my bag first. I could keep it on and keep myself warm until I was like seconds before I was going to get moving. I really liked that.
And that's on the PCT?
Yeah, that was this year. Yeah.
Interesting. So you're just cowboy camping with the bugs and whatever else is out there?
Yeah. So I carry a bug net, like an oversized bug net that comes down to my waist. And I will hike in that, and I will sleep in that as well if the bugs are bad. But most of the time, I just cowboy camp. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had a scenario where I was going to cowboy camp, and I can't remember what happened. I feel like something happened where my shelter situation didn't work out the way that I thought. And right as it starts to get dark, all these massive spiders just start crawling out of everywhere. And I'm just like, I started freaking out. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
And thankfully someone with me had a hammock. And we had supplied them with the hammock. It was an influencer, and we'd given them a bug net just in case, taking care of them. And he's like, I don't need this bug net. Like there's no bugs out or anything like that. So he gave me the bug net. Yeah. So I just put this hammock bug net up and over, around my sleep situation. And I kept my hat on to keep the net from off my face. And I get it cinched up. I lay down in my bag and I look up at the moon. And within 5 seconds, a spider just crawls across my face on the outside of it. And I'm like, nope, I will never sleep without like a net again. You know what I mean? In the winter I do. But anyways, it takes you just got to not think about it, I guess.
Yeah. So my first night of the PCT in 2019, camping in Washington at a popular camp spot, I slapped myself in the face in the middle of the night, and I pull a mouse off my face and just like instinctively just like chuck it away, and then realize like that was a mouse I was holding. I was like, so like I didn't sleep well the next night. I was scared.
Yeah. No, that doesn't work for me. At least I would have to at least have like a bug net to put it on top of me. Right. That's just, that's beyond my limits. But, man, there's so many fascinating things here. You've obviously got so much trail knowledge. You said that you'd hiked over 20,000 miles, right? And you've attempted these FKTs. Is your season kind of over at this point? Are you looking at something, for next year, or what's your plans at this point?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm currently looking for a job and then hoping to do some like Scottish alpinism over this like February, March time. And then
what is Scottish alpinism?
Like really, we don't really get ice. So we get like really, but our snow gets really compact naturally because of how many freeze thaw cycles we'll have in a day. So you can climb 90-degree snow with bits of ice. So there's a lot of mixed climbing on like crappy ice, steep snow, bare rock.
So do you enjoy climbing? Is that like another thing that you do?
Yeah.
Or is
I love winter climbing. Yeah.
Okay. And we didn't even cover this. Where are you based out of? I mean, I'm sure people realize when you're calling headlamps torches and things like that you're maybe not from, the US, but where are you from?
I live in the UK. I haven't spent more than 6 to 8 months in the same place for the last decade, though.
Yeah.
I hike for 6 months, come back and find a job wherever I can, and then go hike again for 6 months.
Do you have any skills that you want to market on the podcast here? Any specialties for employment besides being crazy hiker and knowing that you're going to quit in 6 months?
I'm actually planning to not hike, do a big multi-thousand-mile trip for a while now.
Okay.
I'm considering that this might be my last one.
Really?
Stick to like the sub 2-week trips and try and have a bit of normalcy.
I mean, for what, 4 or 5, 6 years now, you've kind of been on this train that of FKT attempts, and 9 years.
9 years of this, yeah. 2013 was my first hike, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible.
It's been a big commitment.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a massive, massive commitment. And like you say, like you're having to quit, find work, and just balance all that for a lot of years. That's gonna wear on you for sure. Yeah.
So definitely ready to have a sense of stability for a while.
For sure. That's super fascinating. Well, when I guess you get your next adventure planned, because this is I don't know if we'll see if you can really calm down and not do this, or if you're just going to have to jump right back into it, right? But is there any place, like, do you have an Instagram account or something like that people can follow you on or stay up to date on some of your adventures?
Yeah, I have Instagram. It's _Joshua Perry, Perry, just my name. That's kind of the only social media I do.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get better at it.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm not a social media poster myself either, and I don't know why I can't get myself to do it more. But okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, we covered a fraction of things that you've done. It'd be fascinating to have you back on in the future sometime to just dive deeper into some of these aspects. But really, really incredible. Just to hear what your life is like. I'm still fascinated by just what makes you tick and what makes you be able to go and put these efforts in. I still am just shocked that you're not running more on trail. Just absolutely a shocker, I guess, to me personally. But really, really fascinating. You're starting.
I'm trying to run more each time. The better I get as a runner. I probably won't do more miles, but it'd be like nice to be able to take a few breaks a day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's got to be man. I'm getting right back into it here, but like that's got to be one of the toughest things is like the desire to just want to stop, to take a break, right? Because like that's just got to like build and build and build to where you're just like, man, if I could just lay down for 15 minutes, like, and just relax.
It's the desire to bend my legs.
Yeah.
It's like I kick my legs back and just try and bend them a bit, because otherwise, like you're even if you're shuffling, your legs don't really bend, and then you sleep with your legs straight, and so your hamstrings just like want to curl up.
Yeah.
And like I'll just sit cross-legged for 10 minutes or 5 minutes or a minute. Or sleep in the fetal position on trail for 30 seconds, just to like have my legs in a different position, because otherwise they're in that same limited range of motion for the entire time.
No, for sure. When I stop, like that's the first thing I want to do is just stretch and move my legs. I'm just so nervous of them getting bound up or whatever, and you feel it too. So that makes total sense to me. But anyways, you've got a lot of grit, Josh. You've definitely pushing limits that not many people in the world are pushing. So really phenomenal. Congrats on setting that record on the PCT this year. We'll see if your AZT, which we didn't even get to really talk about too much, see if that stands the test of these attempters. But really phenomenal work that you've done, and really appreciate you coming on the podcast. So everyone that's still on here, thank you for listening to the Live Ultralight podcast. Make sure you rank and review the podcast if you have not already. We really appreciate that. That helps us get guests on, but also just helps us know what kind of content you guys appreciate. So if you're on YouTube, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode, and make sure to subscribe. We'll catch you guys on a future episode. Thanks, Josh, again for having us. Hopefully we'll have you back on the podcast in the future.